In this video, we are going to talk about interest, and specifically, we're going to discuss how to calculate simple interest. Let's start with a definition of what interest is. So in the context of what we're going to be discussing, interest is the money that is paid to you for putting money into a bank. So basically, if you put $400 into a bank, the bank will then pay you interest or money above and beyond what you put into the bank for having the right to use your money to lend out to other people. That is interest. So again, it's the amount of money that you earn on top of the original amount that you put into the bank. Now there's interest, different meanings of interest in other contexts, right? But we're just dealing with banks right now and what is called simple interest. So, simple interest is the interest paid on the original amount deposited only. So in most banks, they do something a little more than simple interest, but we're going to start with an idea of what's called very simple interest. So meaning, if I put $400 into the bank, you are going to earn interest only on that $400, and that's it. Okay, so let's see what formula we can use to calculate it and why the formula makes sense. So we are told that simple interest is I, the interest, is equal to the principal. The principal is the starting amount. Think about the principal as the foundation of something. So it's the deposit, the original amount you put into your account, times the rate. The rate would be the percentage of that original amount that we are going to take and then earn on the principal. So that could be a percentage like 2%, 3%, 1.7%. The time, well, that's the amount of time that we leave that principal in the bank so that it is accumulating certain amounts of interest based on that rate. So it makes sense that we multiply them if you think of it this way. If I have $1,000 I deposit my principal, I would multiply that by the rate. Let's say that's 1%. Well, if I leave that money, that $1,000 in the bank for let's say 7 years, then I will have earned 7 total percentage points in simple interest because it's 7 years times 1% per year, so 7% of the $1,000. It makes sense to multiply in that way. Very cool. In shorthand notation, in the formula you'll probably see in most textbooks and in the class that you will be studying this in, you'll see I equals P times R times T, or as I affectionately call it, IPERT. Okay, so interest equals principal times rate times time. That's simple interest. Now with all of those definitions out of the way, let's take a look at just how to use this formula. So I'm going to go over one word problem example, and then in the second half of the video, I'll do a second clip. I'll do a word problem where the interest rate's a little funky. Let's dive into it. So this says you deposit $350 at an annual interest rate. That means annually, once per year, of 2% over 5 years. We're instructed to find the interest earned and the balance. So interest is the amount of money that we'll get from this formula that we earn on top of the principal. The balance would be the ending amount of money that we have when we add the interest plus the principal, the original amount. When I do these problems, I like to kind of get an idea of what I have, the information I have. You deposit $350, that's your principal. So I'm just going to write that out as P equals $350. And we do that at an annual interest rate. So we deposit that $350 at an annual interest rate of 2%. So that would be R, that's my rate. Now 2% we don't write down as 2, we write it as its decimal equivalent because we're going to be using it in multiplication. And we know that 2% is 0.02. And then the amount of time that we invested for over 5 years. So I like to write all this out so that all we now need to do is plug the information into our formula. Our simple interest formula is I equals P times R times T. And so evaluating in or plugging in these numbers into our formula, we have P is 350. So I get 350. And I'm going to put that in parentheses just to show that we've subbed it in for P times 0.02. That would be in for the rate. Times, finally, the amount of time. That would be 5 years. And all you do is, and this is where using a calculator I'd be totally cool with, but you could use a calculator, you could do it mentally, you do out that multiplication and we get a result of 35. So what does that 35 mean? That means that your interest is $35. So for putting your money into this particular bank and earning simple interest, you've earned $35. So what is the balance? Well, the balance, again, is going to be the result of adding on this interest that you've earned onto the principal. So the balance is equal to the interest plus the principal. So you could see that formula as I plus P if you really want to. But very simply, we take the interest, the $35 that we've earned, and we add it onto the original amount, $350. And that gives us the current balance, or the current amount of money we now have in the bank, assuming you didn't take anything out. So the balance is $385. And I'll put dollar signs there just for unit's sake. That's it, peeps. That's simply simple interest. That was pretty corny. If you need another example, I certainly have one coming for you on the other side of this current video. I'm going to go over one where we don't give you the amount of time in years, but we give it to you in months. And in simple interest, we calculate everything based on an annual rate. So you're going to have to convert months into years. Stay tuned for that on the other side of this video so that you've got a really good width of understanding. And here we go on the other side of the video. As promised, I'm going to go over a brief example that will help you to deal with a simple interest problem when you are given time in months, not in years. And it's not so bad. It's, well, as simple as simple interest. There's that joke again. All right, before my humor kills you. Let's get rolling. So you are depositing or have deposited $4,000 at an annual interest rate of 3% over 9 months. Okay, there's those 9 months. It says find the interest earned and the balance. First, as I did earlier in the video, I like to list out the variables that I have. I'm given my principal. Again, the principal is the amount I've deposited, the original amount. That is $4,000. So I'm going to write that right here. The rate is 3%, which I immediately translate into a decimal so that we can use it in our calculations. 3% goes to 0.03. And then T, the amount of time, is not 9. That interest, that 3%, is applied to the principal annually, not monthly. So if I were to plug 9 into the problem, I would be saying that I'm applying 3% over 9 years, not 9 months. So how do we deal with the 9 months? I'm going to do a little bit of side thinking on this. If I have 9 months and there's 12 months in the year, I should divide 9 by 12, or look at it as a fraction, 9 months out of 12 months in a year. That will convert this as the fraction of a total year that we have. So this would be equal to 3/4. Some people like to do this in their calculator and get a decimal of 0.75. They are equivalent to each other, and you can use either number in your calculations. Because I'm going to be using a percentage as a decimal, I'm going to choose 0.75. But again, it does not matter which number presentation that you use, 3/4 or 0.75. So I've got 0.75 years. 3/4 of a year is 9 months. Now I'm ready to rock and roll. I use my simple interest formula, I equals PRT. And so now I'm going to replace P with 4,000. I'm going to put that into parentheses to show that evaluation of 4,000 in for P. The same with R, which is 0.03. Here, plug into R. And then finally, I've got the time being evaluated into T, which is 0.75. Definitely use a calculator for this. When you do it out, it's actually a nice number. We get an answer of 90. So what does that 90 represent? It represents the interest. So our interest, I, is equal to $90. So we have found the interest, the simple interest that we've earned, according to these, well, according to the context, according to the stipulations in the word problem. To find the balance, we take the interest and we add it on to the principal. So my balance, I'll call that B, is going to be equal to the $90 we just earned plus the 4,000 that we started with. So at the end of those 9 months, we have $4,090. Pretty sweet. And that's simple interest. Go rock some practice problems on them. In a later video, I'll be going over problems that involve you finding things like the rate, the time, and the principal when given the interest. Those will be fun.